bulldozers from Strickland Grading to clear off the woods for 5 acres to give me room to work. I then needed to know where bedrock was, because I intended to build a shaft on this vein down to bedrock. So Camp Well Drilling came in, and I asked him to drill holes, 6-inch holes, down until he hit blue granite, which was the bedrock in this area, and pull out, and not drop a casing or anything, just tell me how deep it was to blue granite. So he proceeded to drill holes across the property wherever I told him. He was going up the hill here to drill another hole up here in case the bedrock was closer to the surface. I was looking for a place to put this shaft in so I wouldn't have to go too deep. Well, the bedrock was flat across the entire property. It was 65 feet deep, so I opted to put my shaft right here on top of the spot where I had cut through the vein with this trench. This is the trench I had filled in by that vein, and it had settled that much over the 2 or 3 years it took me to sell the shares and return. This is one of my neighbors, Dob Edgerton, just watching what was going on. So I had to do a lot of digging, which I couldn't do with my small backhoe, so I bought a larger backhoe, which is a track hoe or excavator. Now this excavator cost me $60,000. I proceeded to dig a hole as deep as I could. Well, I went down 26 feet, and then I had to drive around here and drive down to here with the excavator and start digging this way and digging down. Well, I had no place to put the dirt down here, so what I did was I dug a little terrace right here that I could reach from up above. And I would go down below here, over here, and start digging and put the dirt on this terrace, drive back up the hill, over here, reach down to this terrace, take the dirt and throw it behind myself, get on top of the pile of dirt and throw it back again, and then on top of the pile and throw it back again. I eventually moved 1,000,000 yards of dirt out of this hole, and I threw it back 3 times, so I've actually moved 3,000,000 yards of dirt out, and I've eventually put 3,000,000 yards of dirt back in. Well, I would drive in here and I would dig here, and you can see I was already hitting water. I was down about 40 feet deep at this point. And I was pumping water out through this hose down to a creek. Now you see a lot of white kaolin mixed in with this here dirt. Well, this is not dirt. There's dirt from here to the surface, but the rest of it is called saprolite, which is a decomposed stone. And there's 65 foot of saprolite at this point to get down to blue granite. This is the oldest geological area in the United States. It's been longer since there's been geological activity here than any place else in the United States, and that's why there's so much of this decomposed matter. Other places the rock only has decomposed down 20 or 30 feet. I was to look at this wall for a long time. I'm having trouble focusing here. This is the water I'm pumping out, and it goes down to a creek about 1.5 miles away, which is called the, it's not a creek, it's called the Second Broad River. As you can see, I'm pumping water with a suction dredge. I have the suction dredge tied to the bottom of this ladder so it won't float away, because I have to go down and gas this pump up every day. I have to stand 1 foot on the ladder, 1 on a pontoon, and pour gas in there, well, several times a day. It has a very small gas tank. I'm hitting what I think is hard rock at this point, but when I get back the next day, the rock is soft again. It's like I'm digging back in mud, like the mud has washed back in the hole. I didn't know at that time, but what was happening is I would get to this decomposed blue granite, which was solid. But once it was exposed to the water, it would soften up and it would turn into mud. It just shows how deep I am. I'm down about 40, 45 feet deep there. Shows all my claw marks from my excavator up there. I couldn't reach that any longer when I was down at this point. I got down to this point here, which was about 45 feet deep. I ran into an old mine shaft. You can hardly see the timber sticking out right here, but the mine shaft was right here. And the timbers sort of fell off into the water as I was digging, because they didn't have anything to support them. And you can notice that the material I'm running into is a different color now, because I'm getting down close to hard blue granite. I thought I was close to success at this point. Now this ladder is, I forget what it was, but it's quite long. There I had some problem with my excavator. The track broke and I had to do some repairs on that. I had a lot of problems along the way here. Here's one of the problems I had was when my pump would stop pumping, I thought somebody was tipping my dredge over and submerging the motor underwater for me and sabotaging me, but it wasn't. It was when my pump would run out of gas and stop pumping, the water would come back down the hose and hit the pump and tip the thing over, and then I'd have to take the motor apart and clean all the water out of it. So I eventually started pounding rocks in the back end of the pontoon so it wouldn't flip over on me. Now you can see that shaft a lot better. Here's the timbers for it right here, and over there. This shaft was 10 foot by 10 foot square, and they had their timbers solid together, and they had wooden pegs stuck in the timbers coming down for a ladder, square wooden pegs that were hand carved, and they were in a burnt hole. And I believe this shaft was built by Cortez when he was in the area with slaves mining gold. And I, of course, was just driving up to the edge here and digging in this hole, trying to get down to blue granite yet. I would have to keep pumping this water every day and try and get it all out, which I never could. It was coming in 250 gallons a minute. There's a very nice view of the shaft there. I believe this is the last time I saw the shaft because I eventually got below it. These poor people worked very hard to get down to that same vein that I'm trying to get down to at this point. They got within 15 foot of that vein and had to quit because that water was coming in so fast they couldn't handle it. They couldn't keep it sealed out and they couldn't pump it evidently. And so that was the last of their efforts right there. One more view of it. It looks like there was a lot of sun down here, but most of the time it was very cold down there and no sun, and so ice accumulated. I got 6 inches of ice on that water, and I had to break it with a pipe wrench so I could get this dredge pump in there and pump the water. So I eventually come up with the idea of using this diaphragm pump here and trying to pump the water with that. Well, that didn't work. I tore up the hoses with it. I tore up diaphragms. I tore up a lot of things trying to get it to work. I tore up a lot of ladders trying to pull this pump out whenever it would get stuck and things of that nature. So then I decided to try a different method. I hired 2 bulldozers at $50 an hour from Strickland Grading Company, and one had a front end loader on it, the other had a push blade on it. They tied these 2 bulldozers together with a very large long cable, and this front bulldozer would go down in the hole and take a scoop of mud out, and the other bulldozer would pull him out of the hole, and they would dump it off in here somewhere. I guess back in there, and then they'd push it off to the side. And they did this all winter long, tied back to back, trying to get the bottom of that hole down to hard blue granite. But one day I was watching them, and this front bucket man, when he would go down here, he was grading the road. By the time he got to the water, his bucket was full of dirt and overflowing. And he was actually carrying dirt down into the water. And I said, no, wait a minute, I don't want you to fill the hole up, I want you to dig it out. So I don't want that bucket to touch the ground until you're in the water. So he proceeded to leave his bucket up till he got in the water, took a scoop of mud, and both bulldozers got stuck down here. So I had to go in and pull them out with the excavator. So that obviously wasn't going to work. So I had to come up with